and welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Sales. I am Ashley Early, and we are so excited because I am not excited to be on my own, but I'm super excited because we have the amazing, the incomparable, the Mrs. Nikki Ivey with us today. If you're not connected with Nikki or paying attention or possibly under a rock the past 4 or 5 months, she has become a force on LinkedIn for SDRs. She is the co-founder of the SDRDefenders community. She's also a LinkedIn sales star for 2020. She's amazing. She's fiery. She's literally got the fiery red hair today. And I'm so excited. Thank you so much for joining me today, Nikki.
Thanks for having me, Ashley. This has been a long time coming. I think it was probably on its way to coming into fruition before either one of us knew that. We were just kind of on these paths, right? Mm-hmm. I remember joining the Other Side of Sales Bravado group, but not even knowing that there was a podcast. And this was far before I got the BDR Breakthrough group, but noticing that there was this overlap in the mission, right? And in the passions of both of those endeavors. And then, like you said, in this past 4 or 5 months, you know, our paths just sort of crossed in a way that we got to do something with it right now.
Yeah. Well,
now let's have a conversation.
And I think there was a Twitter conversation last night, which anyone who's listening can probably go and find, where there might be a Spice Girls role play coming up at some point, which
there might be,
and I'm very much excited for that.
Yeah. It's really fun and exciting. Like, side note, what is happening with, like, there's a small community of B2B sales folk on Twitter, and it is so much fun, and you get to learn these little things about people that you would not learn on LinkedIn.
Yeah, like last night turned into you, me, and 2 other women who are also in B2B sales. Cold Call Carrie, who is awesome, literally one of the best people I've ever seen on the phone, and Sarah Beam, who we interviewed on the podcast a while ago. Like, literally, it was like sharing our passion for like these girl groups and Celine Dion and childhood trauma from like trying to make these girl groups back in the early aughts. And it started with just sharing these things. And then it led to this, like, okay, apparently we're doing a girls' weekend at Carrie's and going to be smoking a bunch of cigars somewhere.
Yeah. It started with girl power, right? Yep. This is how you and I made this. Sweetfish Media had this list of like 53 people to follow on LinkedIn. And then Sarah had tweeted it, and then I was like, girl power. Like, that was really terrible. But I was doing my best and worst Ginger Spice impression via a GIF. And that is how all of this kind of fell together. So we discovered even deeper overlap in our set of interests and passions. So Twitter, am I right?
If you're not on Twitter, please connect with us. It's fun. I find Twitter's not nearly as serious as LinkedIn. No. I think it's a lot more fun. So I'm spending more and more time on Twitter. Now, granted, I'm very much making sure I'm not touching any of the political stuff on Twitter, because otherwise I go down a rabbit hole that ends very ugly-ish. So depending on how you use Twitter, it could be a wonderful or a terrible place. Yeah. So bringing it back. So first of all, you were our amazing, incredible moderator earlier this week for the Selling While Black panel, which is still available. We'll put a link to it in the comment section. If you haven't seen it yet, please take some time and watch it. It is available as a recording. I just want to start with asking, have you had any feedback? Have you had any reaction from people? What's been have you learned anything kind of since then? Or what's that reaction been like?
I was really touched by how sincere people were when they did, sort of give their takeaways. You had, folks not only posting about it once, but then be like, hey, this didn't get enough, not enough people saw this. No, seriously, you guys need to look at this. And then, a bunch of different individuals with, a measurable amount of influence who were, taking this up and trying to spread it around and make sure that as many people as possible heard this conversation because they found it valuable. So I'm proud of that. And I guess that was one thing that I hadn't even thought about or expected, right? I thought about what folks might say, what questions I might get in the moment, but the fact that so many people took it so seriously and were so about, taking it back to their teams and building programs and plans around some of the things that were said in that conversation was super fulfilling to me. And so I'd do it again.
Good, because
besides,
which we're gonna, you said you're willing to do it again. We're going to have you do it again. So if you're not registered on the Other Side of Sales website or following us on LinkedIn and Twitter, you won't get all those updates about when this is happening again, because it will.
And it's a thing that is happening. Actually, I just watched it again today, not to be vain, but to experience once again the sheer brilliance of Blake Hudson.
Those analogies.
Oh my God.
I thought I was good at analogies. Good Lord.
Yeah, and of Galem and of Chantel. Yeah. It was just a really, I was glad that they all agreed to do it, and it was really cool. And the other set of feedback that I got, besides folks, talking about their takeaways and mostly leaders, right, and what they're going to do with their teams, there were people who, are people of color, Black people that are in sales roles now that heard their experiences reflected and validated, and I think that is so important. And, when I hear from people like, hey, you talked about this experience and that's exactly what I went through, particularly around the question, I asked this question, do you feel like you can bring your full self to work? Because it's something that in a very buzzy way, right, pre-COVID and pre-George Floyd, is something that had been going around on LinkedIn, going around the sort of B2B blogosphere. And I was looking at it with, a certain level of skepticism, because it just did not reflect my experience at all. My whole self, for instance, includes things like my natural hair. I every single time that I have worn my natural hair to work, there has been, to some degree, an experience of me being othered by someone.
Can I ask a question about that? So, please. I mean, we've even talked about hair before.
We have.
we've had an exchange about hair, and it was super educational for me. But let's break that down for a minute. Like, can you explain for someone who, especially I think in a lot of guy leaders probably don't, women tend to understand what we say when we mean natural hair. What is natural hair?
Oh, so it is my, I didn't know what the question was going to be. This is interesting. So when I say my natural hair, I just mean wearing my hair as it grows from my head, not straightened, it can be colored, but not straightened, not wearing any kind of extensions or anything like that, anything to make it look more Eurocentric, really, anything to make me look less different. And like, I, as an individual, enjoy dressing up. As you can see, this is my red, white, and revenue outfit. I'm doing a pinup girl thing. This is a victory roll. So she likes a theme, but outside of that, if I just one day want to wash my hair and then wear it just as it naturally is, there are many states in which it's legal for someone to discriminate against me for that and tell me that they will not hire me for that. And
I mean, that's even the case in a lot of branches of the military, I believe.
Right. Exactly. And, if it's not like a hard discrimination, then it's just, again, it's that being othered, right? Having people, try to touch my hair or make comments about it that are outright negative or just patronizing, right? And it's not like those things hurt my feelings so bad and I just can't handle it. It's the cumulative effects of that, along with a lot of the other conversations that can happen in these not diverse environments, that reinforce, when you're just trying to exist and sell, that reinforce this difference, this thing that means that you will never be part of the in-group. And it significantly hinders this ability to feel a sense of belonging and inclusion in a professional setting. And it's tricky to navigate because, the individuals a lot of the time who are asking the questions that make me feel othered or, committing these microaggressions are doing so, unknowingly or unconsciously a lot of the time. And so there is, in most organizations I've ever worked at, there's no recourse for it that doesn't put me back in the situation of feeling even more othered now. So, it's just over a career, you build up these instances. I have many related to my appearance, my hair, the way I talk. But what I want to mention, just while we're on this subject before we transition into the sales stuff, is things that people really don't think of a lot of the time when we talk about what feels like a microaggression. So something as simple as I have not watched football since Colin Kaepernick left the NFL because I believed him when he was protesting about police brutality. He was telling us the things that we needed to know that now folks are waking up to now, but less about him as an individual, you know, going to work and something as simple as they're going to have a pool or something. They're going to do fantasy football. And I'm asked a simple question is if I want to participate in fantasy football. And just the question, first of all, if everybody else is participating and super excited about it, then I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm surrounded by people who aren't listening, who don't care what Colin Kaepernick is, who don't care that Eric Garner couldn't breathe, right?
Yeah.
And maybe not in such an overt way that they don't care, but it certainly isn't something that they have to be conscious of. Yeah. So I'm being, through no fault of my own, again, reminded of that gap between my experience and theirs. And then if someone outright asks me, well, why don't you want to do the fantasy football league? And I say, because I haven't watched football since Colin Kaepernick left. Now I'm in this conversation that can be contentious, that can be, really, really difficult. And again, I don't have a shot at having an equal experience with, say, my white male counterpart who just loves football. It's just football. That's not about anything else. It's just about football. I don't have the luxury of it just being about really anything, but certainly and this is, these are real things that happened to me, or something simple like, there was this gentleman that used to sit next to me when I was an MDR, really sweet kid. I liked him a lot. We were friends as far as I knew, but he would do this thing where he liked to watch Vine videos, and he would show me Vine videos, but only the Vine videos of Black people doing things that he found hilarious. And he didn't show anybody else in the office those videos. And I'm like, oh, do I laugh with you and reinforce this behavior? Do I embarrass you and say, hey, I don't actually think this is funny? And so I didn't feel empowered a lot of the time to do the latter. So it was a lot of just laughing awkwardly and, sucking it up. And then one day I overheard a conversation between that gentleman who was showing me the Vine videos and another gentleman who sat on the other side of him, another salesperson. And they were kind of talking like in softer tones, like they didn't want me to hear them.
Yeah.
And they were talking about Colin Kaepernick. And yeah, and the one guy was, just, listen, you're entitled to your opinion, but as a Black person, this is how uncomfortable these experiences are. Because if everybody's entitled to our opinions, but only some of us are entitled to state those opinions out loud in this environment without having consequences, then is everybody really entitled to their opinion? So this other gentleman was like, just saying these really negative, disparaging things, not just about Colin Kaepernick, but about the things for which he was protesting.
Yeah.
And I'm like, sitting right here and you're saying that Black lives don't matter. And I can't stand up for myself because I need this job, because I am, yes, the only Black woman on this floor of this building and one of only 3 of us at the company, a company of more than 500 people. So what do you do? And this is years ago. This is like you're probably putting it together when I'm talking about Kaepernick, but this is like, a long time ago.
Like 14, 15?
Yeah.
It's years ago.
Yeah. And so that hasn't changed for me. And again, bear in mind that this is Eric Garner happening. So for me, there's not a difference between how that experience felt and how this one felt. The only difference is, this one meaning George Floyd, the only difference is that there are more people expressing that they feel the same way. And I honestly can't figure out why, like what popped, what's the big difference? Because I'm sorry, I've been done with police brutality and white supremacy and institutional racism since Tamir Rice, if I'm keeping it real with you, since Rodney King. I've been fed up. but welcome though. So like, I don't mean to say like we can all be enraged together. Welcome is cool. But
I was going to say, I'm sorry on behalf of those of us who were late to the party. I'm sorry we're late. We're late.
Now, because listen, there are many things that I've been late on too. So I have a high level of empathy for it. But that is just, you asked me about the experience. That's what the experience as a seller has been like. And that's before we even get to the customers, which is a whole other conversation that I think we should probably pick up at the next webinar. But that's a whole other dimension. It's a lot of the concerns that Black sellers have relative to interacting with their customer or their prospect base. I know I've spoken personally with 5 Black salespeople last week about, you know, not feeling like turning on their camera was as safe for them as their white counterparts. Just something as simple as that. Or not knowing, not being certain that if, you know, you encounter a prospect, whether that's that individual or a company that espouses views that are insensitive or incendiary, will your company back you up, or do you just have to take it? I've been in situations where I just had to take it. And so there's a lot to specifically to being a Black salesperson that I think is just under the cover, which is why I'm so excited about the State of Sales survey.
Yeah, this is, we're recording this, just might as well date. We're literally recording this it is 5:47 on Friday, July 3rd. I have been refreshing the State of Sales survey about every 20 seconds all day as we tick up to the 500 mark. And we're not there, but we're like within 5. I'm
sweet.
So stoked. So just so you know, results for that are going to start coming out probably late July. But already there's going to be some good stuff in there. I'm just peeking in because I'm a data nerd. And it's really fascinating. But I want to kind of dive into something you mentioned back there. Like when someone asks you, oh, well, why don't you watch football? Mm-hmm. It's interesting how questions like that immediately put someone else in the defensive. Oh, why don't you? You're asking the other person to defend, right? A non-action, and B, it implies there's something wrong with it versus, I don't know how you ask that question in a good way.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing is there isn't, I don't think the question in itself is so bad.
No.
I don't think that it can even be, given the climate right now in all years leading up to now, there hasn't been a way to prevent those sorts of conversations from happening. But what it speaks to is that this is a problem that the larger culture has to fix at the same time, obviously, as the workplace culture. Yeah. And so you as an individual, if an individual is asking, well, how do I, make sure that I'm not subjecting people to this, I think it's just a matter of being informed, right? Seeking out this kind of information. There are resources. If you Googled the question, right? Like, what are microaggressions? How to not make people uncomfortable and things like that. Like, it would make it easier. And the more enlightened you are on these things, the less likely you are to even have that kind of exchange. But to an extent, yeah, it can't be helped. And so you just have to make sure that there are other things in place in the culture, in a workplace, that combat that or that come up against that as far as, enabling belonging and inclusion.
Yeah. And I think something else you brought up on the webinar, and that I've been hearing more and more, especially that has been shared with me, and it's something that's been a kind of a bit of a mental shift for myself. I think a lot of other allies in this conversation. I've been talking diversity. I've been talking inclusion for, I like to say, years. I've been trying to do this for years. It wasn't until early after George Floyd that I'd heard of compassion fatigue. I'd heard of people getting tired of being constantly put out. It hadn't, I'm embarrassed now to say it honestly had not occurred to me that up until that point, I had been relying on those who are Black in my network to educate me and to go to them and ask them, is this okay? I was asking them to do all of the emotional lifting and labor. And so that's been something that's been a big shift for me, has been, oh Lord, it didn't occur to me, and that's on me. It should have occurred to me. But at the same time, how can I take that burden on to figure this stuff out. And it's been quite a journey. So my question for you then is, and I kind of love asking this question because you're getting a wide variety of answers. What is something that someone can do to better understand and take some of that emotional weight of education for those who are not Black into better understanding the Black experience? Very convoluted question.
No, I'd ask those same kinds of questions. I think our brains work very similarly. So I'm with you. I think part of it is accepting that there is a ceiling on how much you will be able to understand. And that you understanding every single nuance of this experience is not necessary in order for you to be a valuable and effective ally. That is what I want people to catch in all of this, because I think that, you know, not knowing that, not understanding that for such a long time has held a lot of folks back. They're probably, I mean, I get it. I again, like you, I think you and I spoke about this before, but there are groups to which I do not belong, but for which I advocate and for which I am an ally. And I got to do all of this educate myself stuff too. I got to do all of this figuring out, like, how do I not ask my friends who are gay, lesbian, you know, transgender, queer, all these things, how do I not make my lack of knowledge their problem? And so I am really, really sympathetic to this question. What I have done in that case is, you know, I watch documentaries where people who are in that experience are telling their stories, and I believe them. I do not treat their stories with skepticism. I don't think people who treat Black stories with skepticism, especially in the workplace, are all often conscious of it or doing it, you know, in a way that's intentionally negative. But I think it's just it's an impulse to think that would never happen on my sales floor. You know,
that, I think that's so important, because that's literally the sort of thinking that fueled the Holocaust in a lot of ways. My family has deep ties to Germany. My family was in the war. Some were basically were drafted by the Nazis. Some were involved in the resistance. I got stories there, but it's that sort of thinking that literally led to the deaths of 11 million people. It's that sort of thinking that led to a lot of colonialism and stuff like that. So, we could never do that, but it was happening right under our noses. And it's one of the reasons that we did the State of Sales survey, is to get some of these stories. And I call on anyone who's a sales leader in here. You hit the nail on the head. I hear their story and I believe it. You make a choice to believe it. And in believing it, you accept it. You don't accept that that's everybody's experience, which seems to be how certain news networks like to portray things. They try to find one person and say, oh, this is for the whole group, and it's not.
Right.
But this is that person's truth. And now I know that. And the more of those truths you know, the better you can start to piece these things together and get that dimensionality. But at the same time, you're right. I will never know what it's like I will never know the fear of being pulled over by a cop. I feel fear, but my fear is like, oh God, I don't want a ticket. It's not, at least it wasn't until recently, it's not fear for my life. That is horrifying to so many of us, but I'll never know that. I'll never know that.
I have to tell you something. So this weekend, it was difficult to get into this red, white, and blue. That is not anti-American sentiment. That is the fact that the county I live in here in Florida, Clay County, the sheriff came out the other day and said, if the local law enforcement felt overwhelmed by any protesters, that he would deputize every private citizen who legally owned a gun to take up those arms against protesters. And my kids are very like into what's going on right now. So I texted them this news story because I think it's important for them to know what's going on in the community where we live. And then my 14-year-old made Black Lives Matter signs and I'm definitely going to be protesting on the 4th of July at this busy corner right in the neighborhood where I go do my grocery shopping, because I think that this community needs to see that this is how I respond. There are Black lives that matter in this community. And, you know, the response to that kind of intimidation and bullying from, you know, the state essentially cannot be tolerated sitting down. It just can't be. So when you talk about that fear, I was just thinking, okay, I'm going to go out there. I'm probably still going to wear red, white, and blue because I look good in these colors.
Yes, you do.
And white supremacy will not rob me of that. Will not rob me of a red lip. But my daughter came to me, my little 14-year-old girl, and she printed out these like safety measures that you take when you protest, which I haven't protested yet, so I didn't know about it. And so she printed this out, and then she tried on, and Amy's so sad, Ashley. She tried on the outfit that she said she's going to wear. She wants to come with me. And she's like, well, you have to put this on your eyes, these goggles, so that, you know, the pepper spray doesn't get you. And then you have to wear protective clothing in case people spit at you or throw things at you. And here's how you respond if the police try and you know, harass you or say things to you. And it was just like another level of frustration and pain, and at the same time of reinforcement of why I do this work, why I do it in my community, why I do it in my profession, in my career, why I do it anywhere that will have me. Because look, it's not going to be long. My daughter's excited for the day that she gets to vote, and it's not going to be long before these problems that we have not fixed yet are hers. And I really didn't plan on stumping here, but but the truth is, I can't sit here and lie. I can't sit here in my USO girl outfit and pretend like these things are not so much deeper, so much deeper than they've ever been, I think, you know, given credit for. So that fear that you talk about, it's real. And it has had an effect on how I react to intimidation from the state based on race. It has affected how I react in those situations that I imparted to you earlier. But that time for me is over. I want that time to be over for everyone, not because I'm just so angry. I've been mad, you know, I've been enraged. It's not that. It's just, it's not effective to just take it. I'm part of the problem if I don't speak up for myself. And my daughter won't be proud of me. She won't. And her job will be harder when she becomes an adult if I don't at least try to make a difference here. So everything I do, everything that I'm doing comes down to that, comes down to what kind of impact I can make on the future. I feel like I'm rambling. I'm just super excited and passionate about these things. And I want people to see this person who is visible in the B2B community. And, you know, I think that there is an element of fun and whimsy associated with my brand. And it's important for people to know that and this level of activism and this level of, you know, determination toward this problem are not mutually exclusive.
No. And it's fascinating to me too, how much, first of all, I hear your daughter prepping for this and my heart just breaks that she even has to consider these things, that a girl, a 14-year-old girl, period, full stop, standing on the side of the road, holding up a sign that has a political message, but just standing, holding up a sign, has to be concerned about her fellow citizens spitting on her. That breaks my heart. I have said for years that the most American thing you can do is disagree with somebody. Not belittle them, not put them down, not tell them they're stupid. You can think they're stupid, but you can disagree. That is like literally the First Amendment. And it's not about stifling and whatever else. And we can debate and he and hem and haw and disagree and agree a million times over on how the best way to move forward is. That discussion and that debate and that interaction between citizens and the state and fellow citizens and other people, that's how progress is made. And every step forward for civil rights, period, has always been fought for, has always involved, sadly, a certain element of violence. Not necessarily people literally going and attacking fellow citizens. In many cases, the government coming back and attacking the citizens.
Right.
That's one of the things that kind of kills me, is like, it's know your history, y'all. This isn't,
well,
this
one
is
of the things
civil rights, this is emancipation, this is women's right, this is abortion, this is interracial marriage, this is gay marriage, this is everything that we now, I literally was talking with my mother last night about something, and I don't even remember what it was, but she's like, how are we debating what a human right is?
Right.
How are we having this discussion in 2020? So, and there's also the side of me that looks at your daughter, and I have a younger cousin who's been really involved in the protests in LA, and I am just so proud, and I'm so excited, and I'm relieved, because one of the things as a millennial that my generation can kind of drive me nuts a little bit is we can be a little, not passive, but we are very good, I think, at telling ourselves that we're doing something by just talking about it on the internet.
What I think that is, right, I have this unique situation of, by the numbers, being in the same generation as my 21-year-old son.
Millennial's like a 20-year weird thing.
Yeah,
it's strange.
From 81 to 99. I was born in 81. He was born in 99.
Yeah.
This makes you a millennial. And what I see that we have in common, that you're identifying, is we hope. We really do have a hope that things can change. But sometimes that hope, when not given, purposeful direction, that's when it becomes a problem.
Yep.
And I think that's exactly what you're talking about, that does characterize this generation. But it's the good stuff, though. The bones are there.
Yeah, exactly.
This capacity for hope will be one of the things that saves us. We couldn't do anything we need to do without it.
And I feel like it's one of the things like our parents' generation struggles with. Like, I know with my parents, that's something, and my parents are very liberal. And it's something they struggled with, because it's kind of like they weren't accepting of the world as it was. But at the same time, I think they felt a certain amount of powerlessness. They're like, okay, well, I can't fix the world, but I can make sure our daughters know that they can dream whatever they want to dream, and they're exposed to different cultures, even though we're in this really, 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 really non-diverse town in the mountains outside Seattle. They really tried. And I've actually had conversations with both of them recently where I said, thank you for giving me a head start on all this and opening my eyes and making it easier for me to have these conversations that are really hard and at the same time really scary. And every time I feel myself getting scared, getting nervous, going, I don't want to lose business, I don't want to lose my income, I don't want these people that I really respect to think I'm going too far, I'm kind of checking myself and thinking, you're going to laugh at this, but I swear to God, I've done it 4 or 5 times. What would Nikki say? What would Larry Long say? What would Brian Smith say? What would these people who are these incredible outspoken people, would they be nervous? Would they be scared in the same way I am? And every time in that case, I'm like, yeah, they probably would be, but they're also probably experiencing a level of this every day that I'm not. And that's not okay. And I don't have kids. I have dogs because they're easier. And I'm not ready for another human being.
That is true. They are easier.
Yeah, you can lock them in a crate, have a drink, and no one calls CPS. It's great. Actually, it's true. But at the same,
absolutely true.
It's really true. But at the same time, I'm so excited to see the people coming up behind us getting really involved and really angry and putting their actions where their ideas are. That's really inspiring. That's really inspiring to me. And it's inspiring to see our generation kind of coming back and going, all right, we're doing this. Like, I think of there's been a few protests I remember from the 90s, like around the WTO and around even like Occupy Wall Street. Just kind of started and fizzled. There weren't huge conversations around it like there are now. So I'm very hopeful. I still think it might get worse before it gets better, but I'm very hopeful that we are finally taking some actual steps in the right direction.
That's a really good point, that there is like a generational overlap in interests and a generational overlap in values and sense of what is the mission of citizens. And that is exciting. I think you're right. That is what's pushing this whole thing forward. And just, I think there is also a certain level of fed upness, right? I mean, you're talking about the older millennials, or Zennials with an X, those from 81 to 84. That's who I really am.
Oh, I like that.
But you're talking about these people who lived through, right? Like I said, Rodney King, Amadou Diallo, like this list that's so long, it makes me sad to say all of the names.
Yeah.
And I remember being in my 5th grade social studies class, and it was 92, I believe, and we were doing a mock election, and I voted for Bill Clinton, and I didn't understand exactly what was. all I know is that he was on Arsenio Hall and he played the saxophone, and that made him my friend. But at the same time, right, those people, when we grow up and we find out about the prison industrial complex and COINTELPRO and all those other things, and that happened in our lifetimes that affect us, it just is, it's really difficult, and for me, impossible to stop fighting now. I just can't go back.
It is nice to see these kind of big structural shifts happening. At least, maybe not big shifts, but at least small shifts. Like, for example, the Redskins announced today they're looking into reviewing the name. Yay. Mm-hmm. That's been how many years coming? I mean, I remember talking about that when I was like I remember early elementary school going, you could say that? Like,
yeah. Like, yeah, my
what?
kids
really?
to me, my 17-year-old was like righteously indignant yesterday. Like, she was so angry. She's like, why are we doing this to the Native Americans? And I don't mean to laugh. Her passion, it tickled me. But yeah. She was like, I just read that, they were only 1% of the population in this country.
And yet they're what, 3% of professional sports teams' names?
She said that what really was messing with her is that there were Native American nations and communities that were asking for COVID supplies, and we sent them by we, I mean the government sent them body bags. Like, let that shit sink in.
You want to get pissed off. Read about how a lot of Indigenous people in the U.S. even today are being treated by the federal government and the Bureau of Indian Affairs. In fact, it's called the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I think it's a problem, but
yeah,
deal with all that stuff. We've got a lot to do. We've got a lot to do.
And welcome to Nikki and Ashley boiling the social justice ocean. Come along.
While we're at it, do you want to talk about stem cells and abortion? No.
Let's do it.
Like the one thing we haven't hit.
You know what? Here's where we are in I think in our compassion fatigue, in our like trying to process and deal with and stay healthy with the stuff that we're dealing with. Is you just said stem cell research and abortion, and I laughed, I cackled. So like, and not because it's funny, but because like I'm a human being, and this stuff is so hard. At some point, you got to release that pressure valve, right? Yeah. And you know who else has to release the pressure valve? SDRs.
And we talk about change, and one of the things that's changed is kind of the rise of the SDR over the past 20 years. And in the past few years even, there's been more and more of an outcry saying the SDR is not an expendable resource. And one of the things that we talked about at the beginning that I started kind of noticing I found you found me, was with the founding of the SDRDefenders. And I don't think anyone who has done the job says SDRs don't need defending, but understanding the nuances of all the different things that kind of SDRs today face that maybe they didn't face 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, making sure that they've got that enablement. So talk to me a little bit about some of the reasons and some of the experiences that you've seen and that you've had that have fueled that experience.
SDRs are responsible for between 60 and 80% of pipeline at world-class companies. And they are the least compensated people in the building most of the time. That is unacceptable. The average tenure for an SDR is shorter than the average amount of time that people are taking to promote SDRs into AE positions. So it's just set up for failure.
Yep.
And the people who lead SDR teams often are folks who nailed the job as an SDR, were not offered much at all, if anything, in the way of leadership training, and are now tasked with this team. And they've got frustrations because their income probably went down, right? Because they're not, in control of it themselves anymore. And because they themselves are not, enabled or empowered the way that they need to be. And a lot of it has to do with, just, it is a cultural thing. It's just the way that things have been done. We haven't been intentional enough about this. At some companies, depending on their size, that there is a real constraint on resources to be able to do that for people. But I think the more that we have these conversations, do the research and put out studies and data that support these things that we're talking about, support the need for change, I think that that's one of the things that's going to propel us forward. And it's one of the reasons why SDR Defenders, like, we have different, I hate to call them personas, but different roles that we support and appeal to, right? So there's the SDR stars, who are actually the folks that are in the roles doing the work, the practitioners of prospecting work, right? It can be a BDR, an MDR, whatever, or a full cycle rep even, right? And then there are the SDR, the graduates, who are folks who were and got their start in that, and now they're in a closing role. And then there are the champions, right? Who are folks who are on up into the C-suite, that are folks who either just are, they feel they identify with our passion for how this group should be treated, or they themselves started as SDRs. I have encountered so many, just since we started SDR Defenders, people who are VPs of sales at organizations, and again, in the C-suite, who got their start as SDRs and who still use and love and cherish all the things that they learned in that role. So, there's various.
It's fascinating to me too, because there was a study, I think it was Harvard Business, and I'll try and find it. Harvard Business did a study on, I think it was Fortune 500 CEOs, and picked the top 10 most common first jobs that those CEOs had had. Mm-hmm. Guess what the number one job was?
What?
Sales.
What?
Entry-level salespeople was the number one job for Fortune 500 CEOs. Like, you literally, and I've said this for years, SDR is, I think, the best first job you can get in terms of like a professional job, because you get exposed to all these different things. There is so much that is so right about an SDR job. And I mean, to quote John Barrows always says, sales is the best job in the world when it's done right, and the worst job in the world when it's done wrong. Mm-hmm. SDRs are just now starting to be accepted as a part of a sales career. Mm-hmm. Before that, it was, like you said, it's this idea of, I mean, and you can trace it back to, like, I think it was Oracle in like the 90s and the early 2000s that would hire 100 people and fire 90% of them within the first year. Yeah. So it's like only the sharks survive. And I love looking at the evolution that our career, our space has had, from that to, I was listening to a great webinar that VanillaSoft did with Topo. Mm-hmm. You should be following both those organizations because they do great content. But Topo was saying that they had, they work with a lot of big SaaS companies, and that one of their companies completely redid their priorities for 2021 because COVID. And they added 2 priorities that were not there before. And they didn't just add them, they put them at the top of the list. Mm-hmm. Those priorities were employee satisfaction and employee retention. And this is a 100+ person sales org. Mm-hmm. Suddenly prioritizing employee enablement, employee retention. I cannot tell you how excited that made me. Yeah. Because I feel like this is something that has been long overdue. I hope it sticks. I hope it's a trend. And I hope it does. I don't believe in trickle down economics, but that's a different thing. But I really do hope this starts looking at these things at an SDR level. I mean, even before we started, we talked about kind of, how to, and it's interesting too, bringing it back to diversity. Mm-hmm. Every company I have been at, my team that I directly managed was typically the most diverse team in the company. And that's something I took a lot of pride in, but at the same time, always kind of frustrated me, because it felt mm-hmm. like, why am I the only one who's really prioritizing this? And even now I look back and go, I could have done more. I could have had more of this. I should have had more of that. I should have tried to figure this out earlier. But
yeah,
a lot of organizations lean on SDR teams to hit their diversity numbers. But there are failures along the way that lead to a lot of those people from diverse backgrounds falling out of the organization before they're able to get that next position, whether it's AE, marketing, CS, support, anything like that, even engineering and stuff like that.
Here's why I think that
kills
happens.
me.
I think that happens because people are focusing on avoiding a PR scandal and they're focused on compliance, corporate compliance, when it comes to how they approach the issue of diversity. They are doing it to check a box. It'd be so much easier and more fulfilling if we thought about it in terms of what impact we could have on the community where we're located or into which we sell. Yeah. The level of upward mobility that even an entry-level sales job offers, say, a single mom, as compared to working 2 retail jobs. I mean, it's not even a comparison. So if you think about it,
seems like a pipe dream. Like I'm known for talking to people on the street, like Uber drivers and people in stores, and I notice they've got that sales instinct. I'll tell them, dude, here's my card. Hit me up. I want to get you a better job. I think I've done this. My husband can now do the pitch for me. He's heard me do it so many freaking times. I have had 2 people out of dozens actually follow up with me and hit me this past year. I think it's because they think it's bullshit. They think it's a pipe dream or I'm a scam or something like that. They
don't see themselves that way. That's what it was for me anyway. When I was coming from retail, I had really just lived in this place. Many people know this about me. I was a teen mom. I, got pregnant when I was 16. I had my son when I was 17. And it's a whole other conversation about how American society demonizes motherhood and Black women. But anyway, I digress.
I'll say this. You are, I got to call this out really quick though. You are one of several teen moms I know who are amazing, incredible, huge salespeople. So I think we're also going to have to do some sort of a panel on people who have gone through that experience, because I hear that. I hear that if somebody shares that with me in an interview or something like that, like, brutal honesty, you're getting a job from me because I know you know how to prioritize. I know how to get stuff done. I know you know how to balance. I know you grew up way earlier than I did.
Yeah.
Like yes, please. Like, I don't understand why society's like, oh my God, she's a mother. I don't know if she can handle work. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Shout out to teen moms, first of all. Shout out to teen moms. But it's like, look, it's folks who are coming from, that background. Like I said, that's what it was for me. And when you have that experience, people around you, adults, every adult in my life, when I found out I was pregnant, to include the doctor, he was a friend of one of my, he was the parent of one of my friends, started immediately telling me how limited my choices would now be, how much lower my standards would now have to be for the life that I could make for myself. Now, the tone of these statements was as if they thought they were helping me, just to face this reality. What it actually has been for me has not been, fewer choices, although it took me a long time to see that. It really just meant that it took me longer. That's really it.
You did things in a different order.
I did things in a different order, and I did things like I was 28 when I graduated college. The numbers say that less than 1% teen moms of color are going to graduate from a 4-year college before the age of 30. But I wasn't telling myself that narrative. I wasn't telling myself this narrative of beating the odds, right? I was telling myself, because it's what I had been told and what I had internalized, this narrative of I'm playing catch up. I won't catch up. I'm out of place. Can you imagine being a 30-something-year-old SDR where it's already a job that doesn't get that much respect, and now I have this whole other set of things that reinforce me feeling out of place, not to mention, all this that I got going on. So, I do what I love about entry-level sales, particularly the SDR role, is that, right? Is this idea upward mobility. And I think if organizations looked at it that way versus thinking, oh, how do we not get people mad at us because we're not diverse enough? Oh, I know, hire Black people. How do we not get in trouble from a corporate compliance perspective for not being diverse enough? You know, stop thinking that way. How can we really change the world? We are telling people who sell this product and who we sell it to that the product going to make all these big, you know, impacts on their life. We certainly have the capacity to dream and think that way about the work that we do. So yeah, what if when we hire from the very beginning, the very inception of that idea, we looked at it holistically on what kind of impact this one hire is going to make, or these hires from this circumstance are going to make in this community, in this society, and, you know, not to mention, of course, on this sales floor or in this organization. Mm-hmm. That is how I approach this work with SDRDefenders. It definitely is coming from this place of what impact I can make in the lives of humans, versus, you know, this, can I get 12,000 followers on LinkedIn? Will more people like me? Like, don't care, never had any friends in high school. It is what it is. You know what I mean? Like, yep. Shout out to all the theater nerds. Woo. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
But that's what it really is. That's what it really comes down to. And so that's what I'm looking for in terms of when I'm able to start hoping again about this shift and about what the future can look like in sales culture in particular. I am looking for people, even in the way that we talk about diversity, to start talking about it in a way that is coming from a place that cares more about the overall impact that we can make on the world. Because I know it's crazy to say out loud, I think salespeople can change the world, but I really do think that. Like, well, I really do believe that.
Well, and let's back it up a second, because salespeople have changed the world. How do, like, you know, it's really interesting. Everybody's talking about the Chris Voss masterclass, Never Split the Difference. Mm-hmm. I finally watched it this past weekend, and mm-hmm. Brilliant, highly recommend it. The first 3 videos, I'm sitting back in my chair like, what is this? This is Sales 101. What do you mean people don't know this? People don't know what mirroring is? I teach that on my 3rd day when I'm training SDRs. And he talks in there about how everything is a sale. Everything is a negotiation. So you mm-hmm. take that, you talk about how we believe sales can change the world. Sales has changed the world. The people who are at the front, who are articulating the vision for the future, are salespeople. The only difference is we're getting paid a good amount of money to do it versus the civil rights lawyers and the politicians and the teachers. Thank mm-hmm. you. Same time. Yeah, the teachers who are doing this with kids. It's the same thing. It's all sales. Another great hiring profile, people who have taught. Because mm-hmm. if you could get a bunch of 6-year-olds to get excited about math, you can get some 40-something-year-old IT exec to get excited about software.
Yeah, shout out to Josh Braun and Sarah Brazier. Used to be teachers mm-hmm. out here in these streets. I'm with that.
Andrew Dyer. I'm Andrew. I don't know why Andrew popped into my head. Oh, because he's also a Black sales pro. But there's dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of these sort of things.
So I think if we broke that up, the problem. So if salespeople figured out, with respect to both entry-level sales and how we treat our like sales culture proper, and how we are going to approach diversity, and we decided, okay, what if we understand that we can't fix the entire organization, or we can't fix, you know, the entire country, but if we focus on how we can make sales more inclusive, and then teachers focus on how they can make, you know, classrooms and the material and the curriculum more inclusive, and then athletes and folks who own sports teams focused on how they could make their sphere more inclusive. I think that's the way. What's been happening is those of us, like folks like you and me, who have a heart and a mind for making progress, have been getting drained because we're trying to attack the problem at too large a scale. What's exciting to me about what I can do with SDRs, what we can do with SDRs, is it is a manageable problem.
Yep.
It is something that we can address. Now, I can't say how long it's going to take. I think that's going to depend on, you know, how quickly people start to really buy in, but we are salespeople, so that's on us too. But yeah, I think that's why, another reason why SDRDefenders is so important to me, and why, well, sort of in an organic way, without me having to think about it, my content went to them because it's like, it's a very clear set of things that are broken, and a very clear like population that is hungry for resources and for care. And so if we all just, it's the same concept of each one teach one, or as Kevin Dorsey would say, you know, go and grab two, right?
Yep.
Grab two and go. And so if we're doing that, you sales leader out there who's thinking this is too big a problem for you to handle, it is not. You can totally handle it just by the way you handle the people that report to you and how hiring is done on your team. You can affect upward mobility for young and single moms. You can affect, you know, upward mobility for underrepresented racial groups. You can affect how folks with who are genderqueer or who are gay or trans, how they're treated on your team, and how you address that can affect how those same people and groups are treated by the people on your team outside of work. Like, you can affect those things. Believe you can. Put the intention toward it like you would a revenue goal.
Yeah.
And we got this.
I'll say the other thing too is one of the other shifts I've seen in the conversation is a year ago, you bring up diversity and inclusion, the conversation immediately pivots to exclusion. Oh, if we do this, we have to cut X. If we do this, we lose Y. If we do this, we have to spend more here, which means we have to take money from this. It's not that. Diversity, like I said, it really is, it's holistic. It's looking at everything from how you source to how you train, how you retain, how you promote, what your comp packages look like, what your benefits look like. One of the things I love to bring up with hiring managers is SDR pay, just because straight up, this is just the best example I've got of this is there's that whole, SDRs are entry level. They just need to make just enough and they're cheap labor. Yes, they are some of the lower paid roles in the company. That said, if they're not making a living wage for the market that they're in, you're gonna have high turnover and you're not gonna have a diverse group of people applying because they literally can't afford it. You need to pay commiserate to what you expect. Make an investment in your people, they will make an investment back. It's simple math, and there are a million studies that back this up.
Yeah.
But it's just starting to, it's not an exclusion. It's not like this whole thing around quotas and around affirmative action. It's not if we do this, we have to cut this many other people. It really isn't. Again, that's taking the narrative of one person and applying it to the whole group. That's not how it works. And it can work. And it's hard. It's really hard. Even for like your one little group, it could be really hard. It can be scary. It's terrifying to go to HR and tell HR, especially if you're an SDR manager who has probably never managed before, like you said, wasn't trained. I was promoted to SDR manager. I was given a $3,000 raise and sent to a cheaper market and told to hire 15 people. No training on how to interview, no training on anything. And I can only imagine what it could have been like for some other people. Luckily, I was neurotic enough and paranoid that I was going to get the company a liability lawsuit that I was up all night the night before my first interviews reading what not to say in interviews. But at the same time, I interviewed with a major SaaS company, and in the interview, I had at least 2 different people ask me if I was planning to have kids. Literally illegal. Literally illegal.
That is not a thing that you can do.
And it happens. And it happens. And I know the intent. I choose to believe the intent of these individuals was not to determine whether or not I was a risk for leaving for a pregnancy leave. I think they were really honestly just trying to understand me and who I am.
Yeah.
But again, it's these little things. It's having that bravery to say, I'm going to try to have this conversation. It might not go the way I want. I might piss someone off, but I also trust my ability as a salesperson to walk it back.
Yeah.
To push where I need to push and then pull back, to not lie, to not be rude, but to challenge little bits here and there. It makes a difference. It's as simple as going to HR and saying, hey, the past 5 candidates you sent me are white. That's a problem. Yeah. Can I sit down? Can I help you take a look at where you're sourcing? Can I help solicit these things? Don't blame. Okay, this looks off. Can we fix it? Hey,
Yeah.
I've got SDRs who are freaking out every month about how they're going to eat or pay their rent. Can we take a look at the comp plans? We can make sure that I'm not dealing with a bunch of panicked SDRs every month who are therefore not performing well.
Yeah.
It's every single level, and it drives me freaking nuts sometimes. And at the same time, then I'm super excited because for every one of those challenging moments, there's that moment you see someone get their first commission check.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a magical moment. That is a magical moment.
It is. I have a picture. It's like a screenshot of my first big commission check. It was $5,000, but it was big for me.
Yeah.
My first big commission check as an MDR is actually in the media section for that role. And I remember the day that I got it. Scott Leese has been a mentor of mine for a long time. And I wasn't working for him, but he was still, we would chat, about what my experience was and, he would help me out. And I remember the day that I got that and was able to take that screenshot and send it to him. I still have the LinkedIn message too, and send it to him. It was just such a milestone. And you're right. It's why we all stay in this. I often joke to myself that my romance with sales or my love for sales has often felt unrequited. Right. Cause sometimes, baby, it don't love you back.
No.
And then it does beg the question, why do you stay, right? And why do you stay? You stay for the magic. You stay for the magic, just like you talked about. And sometimes it's that milestone commission check. Mm-hmm. Other times it's like a one call close. I still remember how that felt. I remember what I was wearing that day.
I did a scoping call literally yesterday. And the person at the end of the call was like, you know what? You did a really good job on this call. I can tell you're a really good salesperson. I hung up the phone and I cried for 5 minutes because I was like, oh my God, he actually got it. He sees me.
I'm seen.
It doesn't come often. When it does, it's such a rush. And at the same time, I joke all the time. You have to be a little bit of a masochist. Mm-hmm. You have to have a little bit of wiring in your brain that pain, maybe you don't like it, mm-hmm. but it fuels you.
It fuels you.
It fuels you in a way that some people don't like. People talk about there's an X factor in sales. If there's an X factor, that's it. It's how do you take rejection? Do you internalize it and turn it into I'm a terrible person and tear yourself down? Or does it turn into watch this?
Yeah, it's one
of
the things.
Not always, but sometimes.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that I saw in your eyes in a couple of videos that you've made in your content. You can, when someone is speaking and you see that they got steel in their eyes and ice in their veins. When I met Sarah Brazier, and we've only met one time, I happened to be in San Francisco.
Wait, you actually met someone in person? That's a thing?
That is a thing. It was just free. It was Valentine's Day, actually. I had to travel. I was doing something, project with 6 Cents. And so I had traveled to San Francisco on Valentine's Day, because that's when we were having our I Heart BDR Bash, which was loads of fun. Shout out to everybody that made it out for that, by the way.
I remember that. I remember seeing that and being jealous I couldn't go.
But it meant that I was in San Francisco by myself the next day on Valentine's Day. And I was just kind of down in the dumps. And she had come to the event, and we had sort of mentioned, we should get together before I leave town. And people say that, but they don't mean it. But she totally, the next day, on her break, because she had to work that day, met me for coffee. And I made it weird because that's what I do. I think I said something like, I'm a hugger. Is that awkward? And she thought I said, I'm hungry. And she's like, yeah, we could get food. Anyway, when we got to talking, like a flip, like a switch flipped. She was so on, and not in a performative kind of way, but just you could tell she meant everything she said. She is so fucking serious about her career and her success. I had no doubt in my mind that she's going to run the whole thing one day. But you just that level of determination, mm-hmm. I think you can't, there's a lot of talk about the sales versus the science versus the art in sales and what we should hire for. And I think absolutely you've got to hire for folks who have the capacity to execute on the science. But I'm a fan of the art at the same time. Yeah. And I think part of that art is this understanding of yourself, what you can handle, and what you're going to demand in return for what you have handled. That was the impression that she made on me. And I look for that in the eyes, the hearts and minds of other, you know, aspiring SDRs or just folks that I want to hang out with or be in my network, you know. It's cool.
Yeah, it's so, I call that self-awareness. That's something a lot of people, they're like, oh, how come your SDRs do so well? How come your SDRs have such a low burnout rate? Because one of the things I do look for is that self-awareness. You have to, I need someone who knows themselves, because you will learn a lot faster and I can train you a lot quicker if you know yourself. If I have to teach you about yourself and teach you this job, that's setting you and me up for a really rough relationship and a really rough training and onboarding. And that's not good for anybody.
Yeah. But you know who's good at that though? Scott Leese is really good at that. He's really good at, I think it really shocked me when I found this out. One of his degrees is in psychology, I believe. And then he also studied theology. So he has this like base of knowledge in just dealing with sort of the inner workings of people, right? A lot of the mental and spiritual questions and barriers that we have. And salespeople, because we tend to be really emotionally available people a lot of the time, right? We're open books. We deal with that, I think, to a greater extent than other places in an organization. And so it is a skill for a leader, you know, to know how to deal with that when they have to. But I understand what you're saying. It's like, look, there's got to be a ceiling on that, right? It can't be all that. Yeah,
totally. You know, and I've gotten really big. If you're a new SDR manager, strongly recommend you read up on personality theory. Pick a theory, learn it. It's just like picking a sales methodology. It doesn't really matter which one you pick. But if you can start bucketing people, not with the intent of saying, oh, they're this and I only hire ENFJs. That's stupid. But if it's understanding, okay, this person's an ENFJ, that person's an INFP. Okay, I'm going to train them differently. I know I need to deliver feedback differently. I know they're going to interact with me differently, so I can meet them where they are, and then they actually learn.
That's it. That's the essence of sales. Understanding what people are going to respond to.
Yeah. The latest thing I've been trying to teach myself is NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. So understanding how the words that people choose can indicate personalities and life experiences, and helping you kind of do that sort of almost like mentalism sort of stuff. Yeah. Not to manipulate them to do what I want them to do, but to help them get out of their own way and help me be more efficient at my job. Because Lord knows I do not want to talk to you for 20 minutes if you're not a good fit for the product. That's not good for my time or anybody else's.
Yeah. It's just finding all these different ways to remove barriers that they have, right? To understanding how you might or might not be able to help them.
Yep. All right. This has been insane and amazing, and the best way to end a Friday before the 4th of July. I'm still loving red, white, and revenue, or that's just, I'm making that happen next year. That's amazing. We're going to now shift gears slightly to the lightning round. This is a series of kind of rapid fire questions designed to be a little bit lighter, a little bit more fun. Don't think too much about the answers, just kind of whatever comes to mind first. So first, what's your morning routine?
Ooh, Britney Spears played really, really loud. Raisin Bran, because I'm old, and I like old cereals with bran in them for some reason. And let's see, cuddling my 12-year-old.
Yeah, shout out for grape nuts.
Hey, I got them too.
Yep. All right, pick one person who's had a significant impact on your career.
I'm sick of saying this man's name because it's just gonna make his head big. Scott Leese. Okay, there, I said it. Beyond him though, beyond Scott Leese, the gentleman that you guys don't know, but he is the first person to hire me for a job when I first moved to Austin. His name is Brent Cole. He was running business development at Accruent. He's now at a company called Miratech, and I believe in a similar capacity. And first of all, he's just a really skillful salesperson and a really skillful sales leader. But he has believed in me so deeply and so relentlessly from the first day that we met that I would be remiss if I didn't mention his name as well. And it's just one of those things. One of the questions on, I don't remember if it was yours on the sales survey or not, but I think it was, that asked the question about like a mentor. And that his name came up because it really is, when you get access to a mentor's network and you start to be able to meet other people that and gain a level of visibility that can get you other opportunities, it's so important. And that's the effect that, so Brent for believing in me, and then Scott for helping me believe that I deserve to be in spaces, right, where the important conversations are being had and where the opportunities are, have both been super instrumental for me.
I love it. I feel like you might have already answered this, but what's your pump up song?
Ooh. Oh, it is, I have several. It is Britney Spears' Overprotected.
Okay, there we go.
Or Beyonce, Girls Run the World. It depends. It's a mood thing.
Well, then they'll both be featured on the Other Side of Sales playlist on Spotify. And what's one thing you wish you'd learned earlier?
Oof. That I am enough.
Oh God. Okay. And that's a t-shirt. What's your favorite sales book?
This is getting really, really
I had
annoying.
a feeling.
But it's true though. It's just a story about pancakes and why you should tweak the process. It's
so for those of us listening, Nikki just reached behind her offer bookshelf and pulled up a copy of Scott Leese's Addicted to the Process.
I just hope he never listens to this episode. I'm not going to live it down. But anyways,
just for that, I'm sending it to him.
But it is. Just last week, I had a person who was like, I just started an SDR job, and I've had this book where I think it was Fanatical Prospecting, and another book that they said were recommended to them there. What would you recommend? Easy, without even thinking about it. I'm like, it's Addicted to the Process. Because I think that there's so much power in the story that Scott tells about overcoming what he overcame, and, you know, just put the effect that mindset has on your success, especially early in your career. So it's a true story.
100%. All right. What's one way someone could have been a better ally to you?
Ooh. By not waiting for me to be the one to object to behavior that was unacceptable. So if we are in a work environment and you heard somebody say something to me that you know is a microaggression or is just offensive outright, and then when that person walks away, you express to me that you saw that, you heard that, and we agree on what it meant and how unacceptable it was. My question then is, why didn't you say something? I'm tired. I be saying stuff. Like, I have to go through this all the time. Like, it's just really difficult when other folks who feel the same way, they recognize the behavior is bad, but don't themselves speak out against it, right? It reinforces this idea that these are Black people's problems and not America's problems, everybody's problems.
100%. I mean, what is the quote? All that is needed for evil to succeed is for good men to stay silent.
Yep.
All right. What's one way you're working to be a better ally for others?
I did hit on this earlier, but I'll say it again. I'm watching documentaries right now. There's a really great one that my daughter recommended, my 14-year-old daughter, who came out as lesbian on her 14th birthday. Savannah
Yay!
recommended a trans documentary, because she herself is trying to learn how to be a better ally. She talks all the time. She recognized how even within the LGBT community, trans folks are not getting all the respect that they deserve. And so in just her personal journey to figure this out and figure out how to be a better ally, she watched this, and then she helped me and said, hey, this is the thing I watched. And so I'm watching a lot of documentaries. I am just asking people questions and then shutting up, which is not normal for me. You might have noticed. I tend to think that if I'm telling someone a story about myself, I'm demonstrating vulnerability, and then it makes them want to share too. So it's a good thing, right? No, I'm centering myself in what should be their story. Got to stop that. So that's a thing that I'm trying to do, and I'm learning to do that through that relationship, while trying to still balance it out and not put too much on her and make her the gay representative in my household, and through the things that I'm consuming.
That's awesome. All right. And final question. What's your guilty pleasure at the end of a bad day?
Y'all, I am in season 4 of Dawson's Creek on Hulu.
Oh, good Lord.
and I cannot stop myself. Hashtag Team Pacey. I am in love with him. So there's that. My husband's not home. He didn't hear me say it. Y'all won't tell him, right? I'm in love with Pacey. And so this is the 3rd time I have watched Dawson's Creek in its entirety. And Dawson's Creek and the glass of white wine is like, that's the vibe.
That's some therapy right there.
It's therapy. It's hashtag self-care.
Yep, absolutely. Nikki, thank you so much for being on. This has been absolutely incredible. Thank you for being everything that you are and for being brave enough to share all of that with all of us. This has been incredible. I know the best way for people to get in touch with you is to find you on LinkedIn because, as I believe you said in the pregame, that's where you live. So people can find you there. There's also SDRDefenders.com to learn more about that. There's BDR Breakthrough, which is on Bravado, which is a great community to join. Other Side of Sales is also on Bravado. Feel free to jump in there and learn about all things about upcoming webinars and things like that, to learn about the survey results, which are going to be released in about 2 weeks. That survey closed tonight. So if you were listening to this and you haven't filled it out, you missed out. But if you are interested in sharing your stories or any anecdotes or anything like that, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can find more about Other Side of Sales at othersideofsales.com. Also find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. So with that, thank you for listening to another episode of The Other Side of Sales, and we'll see you next time.